EDC4000 Seminar Presentation, Semester 2, October 2013. Guy Watts, U1048517. The issues facing the English as a second language student. Social justice in a school environment is anything that can disadvantage children in some way which they have no control over. This could be based on gender, language, race, class, religion, or nationality, to name a few. It can be at an individual level or a structural level. It's important to me because all children should be treated equally. And in majority of schools, they are treated equally. But they all should also be treated with equity, meaning everyone's needs are met. And for ESL students, maybe their needs are not always met. It's embedded in the Australian teaching standards to teach students with equity and teach them equally. It's an ethical issue to look after students, and it helps create a better society for the future. The issue is English as a second language. I've lived in Singapore for 5 years, and I've worked in international schools for 3 of those years as a teaching assistant. And I have seen how students arrive from overseas, from countries where English is not their first language, and they walk into a classroom where they're speaking English as a second language, and they can face many issues in the classroom. This relates to social justice as they are facing a disadvantage that they have no control over. Their needs are not always met in the classroom. They feel left behind the rest of the class when working. They may feel isolated, and they cannot connect with the rest of the class, and this can affect them throughout their school life. This issue would impact my ability to undertake my duties effectively, because as a teacher, you already have a class of mixed abilities. You will have the core group, the high group, and the low ability group, which you have to differentiate every lesson to accommodate their needs. Having ESL students adds more pressure to a teacher. You are now having to try and teach them English at the same time as teaching the rest of the class who are English speakers. You have to adjust your style for ESL learners, but also keep the rest of the class focused. This issue links to the Australian professional standards. It links to Standard 1, Know Students and How They Learn. It's Standard 1.5, where teachers are expected to differentiate teaching to meet the specific learning needs of students across the full range of abilities. Teachers already do this in a class, and to have ESL students in a class, they will be differentiating to another level. Also, Standard 4, create and maintain supportive and safe learning environments. Standard 4.1 is support student participation. The teacher is expected to identify strategies to support inclusive student participation and engagement in classroom activities. A teacher with ESL students will always strive to add student participation amongst those students to bring them into the classroom fold. Also, Standard 4.4 maintains student safety. Again, it's up to a teacher to maintain the safety of the student and the well-being of the student at all times. Standard 7, engage professionally with colleagues, parents, carers and the community. Standard 7.3, engage with the parents, carers. Understand strategies for working effectively, sensitively and confidentially with parents and carers. It's very important to make sure the parents or carers are aware of their child's situation. But also, Standard 3.7, engage parents, carers in the educative process. The parents need to be aware that maybe they might need to help their students at home with their homework. They maybe need a tutor to come into the house and help with their students understand the English language better. Singapore has a population of just over 5 million people, and it is growing all the time. Due to globalization and the movement of people around the world, 24% of these people are foreigners. And from that 24%, 12% of those are international school attending families, which could be up to some 500,000 people. I know that there are between 10 and 15 international schools in Singapore, and some have 4,000 plus students. And there are new schools being built in the next 2 years which will have a capacity to hold 8,000 international students. I have worked in one of those schools and I've done my teaching practice in 2 others. And I've seen the issues that ESL can bring within a school environment. The issue is big in these schools, and they have large ESL departments to support the ever-growing number of ESL students within their school. Here's an example of one school in Singapore. United World College Singapore is one of the largest schools in Singapore, and it is spread over 2 campuses. As you can see, it has students from around the world, and the pie charts show a language profile of the students in their school. Out of 5,000 students over 2 campuses, 20% of those students consider English as their second language. This is just one school in Singapore, but I'm sure most other schools have a similar situation, and it shows that the number of ESL students in international schools in Singapore is on the larger side, and this will cause issues within every international school within Singapore. And this shows us that the social justice that these students may face could be a problem for them whilst they study in international schools in Singapore. Should ESL students be considered for learning support? In a book called Effective Learning Support in International Schools, written by Martha Haldeman and Angela Hollington, they consider whether students entering a school within the ESL department, are they considered as learning support, or are they just students that don't have a full grasp of the English language? ESL students can be categorized from an early point of entry into an international school. Just because they are not fluent in the English language does not mean they necessarily need learning support. Maybe in their previous school in their own country, they were very successful within class. But due to the fact that they cannot understand the teacher and may not be able to understand their classmates, they fall into a learning support category. Maybe within certain subjects in school, such as mathematics, they are able to excel even when they are not speaking their own language, due to mathematics being something of an international language. Is this an injustice for them? Yes, it is an injustice for them. They've come from a school where they could have been very successful in, and just because they've entered a school where they're not speaking in their first language, they are considered for learning support. They may suffer that stigma within the school, and this may affect them later on in their life and throughout their time in school. I have seen students enter international schools and teachers are not sure how to place them, where to place them within the class or within the school. But when it comes to subjects such as mathematics, they excel very highly, and their mathematics skills shine through, like I said, because this is international language. To overcome this injustice, they need to be considered as ESL students rather than learning support students. Notting Hill Prep School in London, UK, has a policy in place for EAL students. They believe that EAL or ESL students should be there to meet the needs of the students. It should ensure that EAL students are aware they have a valuable contribution to make to the school. That could be in their culture, in their beliefs, helping parents understand how they can support their children at home whilst they learn English as a second language. And they also acknowledge that most EAL students do not have special education needs, which is like I spoke about in the previous slide. It's up to a school to be able to find out, does that student have a learning support or special education needs, or is it down to the fact that it's speaking a new language for the first time? It's also very good to encourage the students to add their culture and their beliefs to the school, which will only benefit the rest of the students within the school. Notting Hill Prep School also believes that schools should adopt a policy of equity amongst all students. Equity meaning that everyone's needs are met, and this includes the needs of ESL students. The approaches to address this issue could be students treated equally amongst others at all times, students' cultures and beliefs celebrated and valued within the school. This will bring them further into the school and will give them greater participation amongst their school friends and school colleagues. The school also believes making staff aware of any child's needs and creating a safe classroom environment for all students. And maybe it's especially important to create a safe environment for students who are different and for students who have ESL, English as a second language. From what I've seen throughout my time as a teaching assistant and on my teaching pracs within international schools in Singapore, I believe that as a beginning teacher, I could try to implement the following ideas to help overcome the issue. I would work collaboratively alongside EAL teachers, explaining to them the plans for my lessons and the plans for the units that we are currently doing, and how they can work with the ESL students to improve their vocabulary, to improve their participation in class. And maybe if there's a writing task, if there's a writing project, they can work on that within their ESL class. I would consider adjusting my teaching staff for ESL students. This could mean encouraging the use of an index glossary book where keywords and phrases can be entered, with an example of use in context where appropriate. Also, write homework instructions on the board and at the same time give them verbally, so that the ESL students can not only see writing of the English language, they can also listen to it as well and form the connection in their heads. I would set different expectations for their work. I would suggest students draft ideas and plans in their first language so they have a full understanding what is expected of them, and then they can work on the information they have and turn that into the English language that they are learning at that time. I would find their strengths and the strengths that they have, and I would use them in class to ensure they feel success in the classroom as often as possible. For example, when it comes to art or mathematics, I would encourage them, if this was one of their skills, I would encourage them to fully participate in the class, and this would run alongside the Australian Teaching Standards 4.1, which is to support student participation at all times. This will give them a sense of belonging in the class, and they will feel success within the class, which is fantastic for them to try and merge themselves into their new environment. I would work one-on-one with them as much as possible. I would use any help I had in the classroom, for example, a teaching assistant, or when parents come in to help at any time. And then it would free me up to work one-on-one with these students to again make them feel part of the class and make them feel part of their new environment. I would carry out reading running records to chart improvement and find areas for future improvement. I would run the reading running records to find out which books they need to read, what level reading they're at, and then I will be able to chart their progress as they read through the books, able to test their comprehension to ensure that they are understanding exactly what they are reading. These are a few of the things that I would try to implement as a beginning teacher into any classroom I enter where there will be ESL students. It may not be as straightforward as it sounds, but slowly over time I will try to implement all of these things to improve the lives of the ESL students in my classroom. The resources that I would need to implement my plan would be maybe the use of flashcards to work with the students and to aid their connection between images and language. I would also need additional visual support, i.e. posters, pictures, photographs, objects, demonstration or use of gesture. This would assist their learning greatly. I would find ability appropriate reading books for ESL students. I would find the correct level reading that they need to enable their English to develop more. I would find key language features of each curriculum area, e.g. key vocabulary, uses of language, forms of text, and I would work with the students and I would make sure they are aware of what they need as they do each unit. I would also use translators. I have worked in schools where students have had iPads with Google Translate on constantly, and the teacher would use that to translate. I've seen it done between Chinese and English many times. I've also seen it happen where a Spanish student or a student from Chile has joined a class late in the year, and she has used Google Translate to aid her on a daily basis within the class. And it's amazing to see their faces once they type the English into the iPad and the Spanish or the Chinese comes out, and immediately they understand. iPads are a great tool to be used for ESL students. The images that you can find on there that can automatically, the students can see what the teacher is talking about, and they are a great help to any ESL student and should be used within a class because the translators on them are increasingly getting better all the time. The key personnel I would use to help me implement my plan would be the ESL department. This department is there to support ESL students within the school, and whenever we were doing any writing work or within the PYP program, a unit of inquiry, and there was a project to be done, I would work alongside the ESL department to help implement the vocabulary the students will need to know for their unit, to help with any writing projects, to help with any writing tasks. I would also use my any teaching assistants that there are in the school. The schools I've worked in, there's always been either one teaching assistant per class, or there has been teaching assistants to be shared across a grade level. The teaching assistants would be able to practice reading with the students, would be able to work on maybe spelling with the students, and would be there to support the students to be able to do some one-on-one teaching with them. Also, I would engage with parents and carers in the educative process of the students. This falls under the Australian Professional Standards for Teachers, Standard 3.7. I would ensure that the parents are aware of what their children are studying at school and maybe how they can improve their English. Maybe this could mean in the form of having a tutor at home in the evenings, or having extra textbooks, coming to see me, asking for extra work for the students, so that we can maybe accelerate their child's learning of English, and which will enable the children to become more part of any classroom. The time frame for these implementations would be ongoing throughout the year. As soon as students entered the classroom, whether that's at the start of the year, midway, or towards the end, I would put my plan into action. I would have regular monitoring of students' progress throughout the year. This could be in the case of reading running records to assess program and written exercises and to monitor how students are progressing. And this would help me evaluate the success of my plan and whether I needed to implement new elements to my plan at any point during the year. By looking at a SWOT analysis of my plan, if I look at the strengths, I think the strengths of my plan are it encourages greater student participation in the class, which will increase their confidence. It's a very student-focused plan, and it will create greater collaboration between teachers. The weaknesses of my plan, it relies heavily on staff collaboration, which could be a problem as it's very difficult for teachers to find time where they can meet together. Also, class sizes and the needs of the rest of the class would be a weakness, could be an issue for my plan. The opportunities that my plan provides, it can provide a platform for the ESL students to grow, and it will encourage a confidence amongst themselves. It will also bring ESL students' cultures and beliefs into the classroom, which could benefit the rest of the class. A threat to my plan. Class timetable is always open to change, and this means that maybe the students will not be able to attend all their ESL classes, and so they will not learn so much English, and there's always external forces which change policies within a school, which are out of a teacher's hands. So overall, there are a number of strengths, but there are also a number of weaknesses and threats. Through doing this presentation, I've learned a lot about myself, my issue, and also the profession I'm now entering. This issue will only increase around the world due to globalization and due to the movement of people, due to employment, and due to maybe fighting in the world and conflicts that are going on around the world and migration. I've learned that a teacher's role is more than just teaching. It's accommodating and it's creating a safe environment for all students to feel once they're in a classroom. The safety of the students is first priority, and the teaching and learning and educating them becomes a second priority. I've understood the importance of reflective practice at all times. Throughout my teaching practicums, I've practiced reflection in all my practicum placements, and I learn from reflection all the time. I feel I've learned so much from this course, and although I worked in the international school prior to this course, by doing this course and completing all the assignments, I feel I am now ready to begin my career as a fully qualified primary school teacher.